If you're looking for a visual representation of just how divided the United States is, there's no better example of what's going on
in the
here.
country. And there's just nothing even close. The bill does a number of things. One, it tackles head on this idea that we've seen last summer and then we still see today, that there should be a movement to defund law enforcement. Now, obviously, the state of Florida, we're not going to do that under my leadership, but if a local government were to do that, that would be catastrophic and have terrible consequences for their citizens. And so this bill actually prevents against local governments defunding law enforcement. We'll be able to stop it at the state level. And if you look at some of these places that have done this, they've already seen crime go up, even just diverting some of the funding to this. And so it's an insane theory. It's not going to be allowed to ever carry the day in the state of Florida. And this bill gives us the tools to make sure that that doesn't happen. It also holds local governments accountable if they fail. If we saw last summer, some of the local governments are actually telling, not necessarily in Florida, but throughout the country, basically telling these folks to stand down, telling police to stand down while cities burnt, while businesses were burnt, while people were being harmed. That's a dereliction of duty. And so what our bill says that I'll sign into law today is that if you're derelict in your duty as a local government, if you tell law enforcement to stand down, then you're responsible for the damage that ensues. And if someone's been harmed or their property has been destroyed, then they can sue you for compensation. We also have penalties for people that commandeer highways, which we saw in other parts of the country. Just think about it. You're driving home from work, and all of a sudden you have people out there shutting down a highway. And we worked hard to make sure that didn't happen in Florida. They start to do that. There needs to be swift penalties, and that's something that just cannot happen. We also saw around the country people toppling monuments of people like George Washington. This bill protects all monuments in Florida. You have no right to go in and take down monuments. We're not going to let the mob win the day with that. Bill also includes liability for mob intimidation. If you think about it, we saw images of people just sitting outside, eating at a restaurant, and then you have this crazed mob circle around them and start screaming and really intimidating. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. You're going to be held accountable. Mind your own business and leave people alone if they're not bothering you. And then finally, and probably maybe most importantly, if you riot, if you loot, if you harm others, particularly if you harm a law enforcement officer during one of these violent assemblies, you're going to jail. We're going to hold you accountable, and we're not going to end up like Portland, where this is just a daily occurrence where these people are doing this. They get arrested, they have their mugshot taken, and then they get put right back on the street to do it again. So I think this bill that I'll sign into law shows the state of Florida takes public safety very seriously. We believe in making sure that our streets are safe. We want to make sure that our cities are prosperous. We want to make sure folks are protected. And there should be no doubt, the minute I sign this bill into law, anybody who wears the uniform in service of protecting the public, this bill will make very clear the state of Florida stands with you.
It reminds you of Jim Crow laws of the past, vagrancy laws that used to say that if 3 or more black people were gathered or standing around, that they were, in essence, doing an illegal act. Set fire to a home. Arson laws exist. Felony charges can be brought against someone who. But when you intentionally, pursue legislation because you do not like the idea that folks are taking to the streets to address racial inequities in this country, that in itself is a racist act.
And Trayvon Martin's dad, Tracy, says if the law was in effect when his son was killed, many peaceful protests that resulted would have been reclassified as rioting.
Before Trayvon, and one of our biggest ways of showing strength and unity in our communities is to go out and protest and speak up for what we believe in. I think that this bill takes away that opportunity.
When I look in this room, then I'm the only person of my gender and of my race that sits on this panel. And I don't choose to express that as a tool to seek some form of concern, but I express it to acknowledge the realities of my world may be different than your world. And so as I go to the foundation and the root of this issue, and I ask myself why, and I look at the title of the bill, to combating public disorder, to be quite frank, to combat mob disorder. And I don't know what the mob is. I don't know if it's the boogeyman or what it is. But as I look at this, it is centered around a specific motive. And so, yes, the good representative has made a concerted effort to make modifications to the bill, but the motive is still the motive. And the motive is centered under the banner of law and order. And so when I close my eyes and I take you into my experience of law and order in America, I close my eyes, and I started tearing up last night when I was thinking about this, because I'm looking at these college students in North Carolina, in South Carolina, and all over Florida, walking inside lunchroom counters, just trying to be served some eggs and some sausage, just trying to drink some coffee. And they use the tool of civil disobedience to help people understand that it's not right to keep someone from having the opportunity to drink from the same water fountain and use the same restroom just because of the color of their skin. And I'm trying to tell you right now, if it wasn't for civil disobedience, if it wasn't for people that stood up and advocated and fought for the things they fought for, I wouldn't be drinking from the same water fountain you're drinking from today. I wouldn't be able to walk inside of the same restaurant and to eat the same foods that you eat. I would have to go behind the lunchroom counter and get my food from the back. And so this is scary. And let me tell you why it's scary. Because there's never been a time in American history where the law has been equally applied. I know that it is what it is. But when you look at the foundation of civil disobedience, Rosa Parks sitting down on the bus just because she was tired, arrested. People going onto buses trying to protest, arrested. When you look at all of these issues, all these basic fundamental issues that people have, I don't want anything different than you have. I just want what you want. I want to be able to go inside of a store in regular plain clothes and not be followed around just because of the color of my skin. I want to be able to drive down a street in a nice car in a nice neighborhood and not be racially profiled. I want to be able to go on the FSU golf course and not be called the N-word, which I was called when I was 16 years old, and spit in my face. I just want the basic things that you have. And so they're not asking for Super Bowl tickets. They're just asking for a seat at the table. And I encourage my colleagues to take a step back and understand that the way we move America forward is not through divisive things like this, but by bringing people to the table of understanding so that they can live their hopes and their dreams and aspirations to take care of their families just like you do.
The bill will change some criminal misdemeanors to felonies. It also prevents people from bailing out of jail until their first court appearance if they were arrested for rioting or other offenses committed during a riot. The bill would also grant civil legal immunity to people who drive through protests.
This law makes civil protests are okay, but this law makes violent protests illegal in the state of Florida.
This law leaves just enough wiggle room for people to abuse it, to criminalize the mere presence at an assembly where other people are doing something wrong. And that should concern anyone who cherishes the Constitution.
The law would punish those who block streets, interfere with, or intimidate bystanders, prohibits local governments from defunding police, and makes it illegal to deface, destroy, or remove monuments without permission.
We're not going to let the mob win the day with that.
Opponents say Florida already has laws on the books to address all those issues. This, they say, could have a chilling effect on people's right to assemble and free speech. Because even if someone else at an otherwise peaceful demonstration does something illegal,
this law would make it so that every single person who's there at that public disturbance is guilty of participating in a riot.
Our message to those people is you're still protected because you're peaceful.
We want people to peacefully protest when they feel the need. This is a riot. And this will get you locked up before quick.
Or drivers who strike protesters during a march. It would make it a felony to participate in protests where the property is damaged or where people are harassed at public accommodations like restaurants. Anyone throwing objects at law enforcement could face 6 months in jail. Those arrested during protests would be denied bail before initial court hearings, and those who organized or funded violent protests will be treated as members of an organized crime group. If House Bill 1 were in effect today, many people speaking at Saturday's protest at the Duval County Courthouse say they'd be in jail.
We need to kill this bill. Doesn't matter what the intent is. They can't handle the power that they already have. We are not giving them any more power. I don't give a about burning buildings and being murdered in the street.
Families of Devon Gregory, Diamonds Ford, and Brittany Williams herself spoke out against police brutality, saying this bill won't stop their fight to get justice for their loved ones.
We cannot stop. We can't just move on, and we can't forget, and we can't turn a deaf ear because it's not us, because it can be any of us at any time.
Organizers say this bill will encourage more protests across the state because they feel it's an attempt to silence marginalized communities.
The local activists I spoke with called the new law discouraging and disappointing, but say it's not going to stop them from organizing.
It's a constitutionally unjust bill, in my opinion.
David Ray has dedicated much of the last year speaking out against social injustice.
It sucks to be unseen. I think that's the whole reason why protesting is the most American form of right in action.
And it is inconsiderate. It is almost a slap in the face.
If you're saying that there are infiltrators, you make a law that now makes it easier for someone to infiltrate, and then as soon as someone does, the organizers get blamed for their actions.
Especially in Florida. If I get caught, if I throw a brick at a cop, hit him in the head, put him in the hospital, kill him, I'm going to jail for a long time.
For these two activists, they say they will continue to organize and push for change.
I don't hear any language to talk about us and what we've gone through as a community.
Supporting Power to Tell TV, Chris Gaines, subscribe and follow us on all social media.